following contains disturbing content, violent content, jump scares, and sudden loud noises. This video may not be suitable for younger viewers or those who are squeamish. Viewer discretion is advised.
There exists an FM radio station known by the name 89.9 WKCR. It's located in New York and is owned by the trustees of Columbia University, where it's operated. On a strange night in 1995, the station was said to have been hijacked by an unknown source that to this day has yet to be identified. It was recorded and dubbed the Old Tape. The broadcast starts with classical music, which is abruptly intervened by a loud screech, which repeats itself. An array of noises then ensues, including feminine moans, ghastly howls, and occasional strikes akin to bell chimes. It's then we're subject to what makes this recording notoriously sinister. A woman's voice imposes with a faint whisper, which slowly progresses to barely audible. She seems to be reciting names and dates of random obituaries in a borderline religious, chanting manner. After many minutes, the station's host cuts in to inform listeners that the original format was running late and would return momentarily. The pirate's voice and identity was never tracked, and the broadcast, to this day, is still a mysterious phenomenon.
Scott, Mark, and Lisa Ann's friend, my friend. February 1985, Frank Oppenheimer, brother Robert, husband of Jackie Emily, father of Michael, our friend. In 1987, Henrietta Graham, mother of Ian and Ralph Sally, my friend. March 17, 1988, Edward McGellis, brother of William, Jim, May, and Peggy, father of Shirley, Abby, and Josephine. April 1988, Ruth Marnani, wife of Rocco, friend of Bob and me.
You're tuned to WKCR FM New York, 89.9 on your dial. Colombian music is running a little late. It will be starting in a few minutes.
It should be noted that this hijacking is only an alleged incident. It's uncertain if it's authentic or fabricated. The only way to tell is through deductive means. So let's divide this up and see if we can't figure out what's going on. Firstly, we need to know where this came from. The first known record of this incident is believed to date back to 2013, coming from 4chan's X Paranormal board, where an anonymous user uploaded the broadcast along with this caption. The weird stuff starts about 16 seconds in. Around 1995, I was about 15. I used to stay up late in my room listening to the radio on a boombox with an integrated tape recorder. I'd dial through the stations, and when I heard something interesting, I'd hit record for a while, then move on. One night, I came across this. I don't think this was the beginning of the broadcast, but I caught a lot of it. Right at the end, an announcer says that the station I was tuned to was WKCR 89.9 New York. There are a bunch of names and dates in there, but I've never run into anything else like this. So we know the where and when, but here's the tricky part. How and why did this come to be? Unfortunately, there isn't a definite answer. All we have are theories. Let's look into some. I'll present 3 that are the most common and pull them apart by explaining the pros and cons of each. 1. The user tuned in to a number station when recording. Probably the most popular theory about this is that the user who recorded the hijack actually recorded a number station, which are shortwave radio transmissions believed to be broadcasted by governments sending encoded messages to their spies across the world. Pros. The hijack does seem to present itself in the style of a number station, in that its messages are mysteriously encoded and to this day are undetermined. Cons. The encoded messages displayed here are not given in numbers, but by death dates and names of people who passed away. If you look at the Kane Project, which is a documentation of almost every number station imaginable, there's not one station that portrays messages in this way. That's not to say this fully debunks this theory, but if the WKCR incident is a number station, it would be the first of its kind. 2. This was an art project created by WKCR. Some think this incident was WKCR's way of being artsy, and people perceived it as someone hacking into their station. Pros. 89.9 WKCR was not your typical station. Back in 1995, it's likely you wouldn't have heard Nirvana, the Spice Girls, Celine Dion, or anyone else popular at the time there. The station is owned by the trustees of Columbia University. To reiterate, college students own the station. So being a college-owned station, a lot of the content played was experimental or avant-garde in nature. It's not too far off to speculate that this alleged hijacking was no exception, especially given the fact amateur operators would be more prone to pranks than professionals. Another thing to note about the likelihood of this theory holding true is the way the station's DJ reacts in the recording. At the end of the broadcast, she says,
You're tuned to WKCR FM New York, 89.9 on your dial. Colombian music is running a little late. It will be starting in a few minutes.
You're tuned to WKCR from New York, 89.9 on your dial. Calming music is running a little late. It will be starting in a few minutes. She doesn't appear to be fazed by any of the few minutes prior. If you're at all familiar with broadcast signal intrusions, you'll know that every time one occurs, it is always mentioned. When a broadcast is compromised, whoever's in charge apologizes and is usually appalled by the previous moments.
Well, if you're wondering what's happened, so am I. Actually, the computer that we have running our news from time to time took off and went wild. So what we're going to do is start over from the top of the Bears and tell you once again about the 30-10 victory they had over Detroit today out at Soldier Field.
Here, we lost all transmit capability on this end. Here in Nevada, the transmitter went belly up suddenly for some unknown reason. I've never seen it do this in all the years that we've been on the air. I have never seen the transmitter in this way just simply fail, massively fail, like a massive heart attack or some kind. And so we have gone to a backup system to get signal to you right now, and I presume it is getting to you right now.
32 minutes past midnight Sunday morning, HBO viewers east of the Mississippi suddenly had their movie, The Falcon and the Snowman, interrupted with this silent message printed over color bars. Good evening, HBO, from Captain Midnight. $12.95 a month? No way. Showtime movie channel, beware.
However, WKCR's host doesn't even so much as address the hack. Take note of how long this hijack goes on. It's somewhere over 5 minutes and 30 seconds. A normal hijack usually lasts a few seconds before immediately being stamped out due to stations using any means necessary to regain their broadcasting. Granted, there have been intrusions lasting up to 5 minutes before, but it's just rare. So if this was a project created to scare listeners, its length would make sense. One final thing that puts the nail in the coffin for most on this theory is the observation that the voice of the DJ sounds almost identical to the voice of the speaker or ghost woman in the hijack.
You're tuned to WKCR FM New York, 89.9 on your dial. Colombian music is running a little late. It will be starting in a few minutes.
February 1985, Frank Oppenheimer, brother Robert, husband Jackie Emily, father Michael, our friend. In 1987, Henrietta Graham, mother Vine, in-law Sally, my friend. March 17, 1988, Edward McGillis, brother William Jr., May and Peggy, father Shirley, Abby, and Geraldine.
She could have very likely alternated her voice between the hijack and the recovery. Cons. It could be possible this wasn't an art project, but a part of the actual station. If you'll recall, the 4chan poster says that they randomly tuned into various stations and recorded what they felt interested them. They continued to say that they were unsure if what they recorded was the entirety of the broadcast. And finally, they state that they didn't know what station they were listening in on until the radio host said the name. With these details, it's not hard to deduce that the poster may have just randomly stumbled across this avant-garde station and believed it to have been overtaken due to how eerily bizarre it was. In reality, it could have been a Halloween special. Other than the year, the date, and time of when this was recorded is unclear, so it's a possibility. 3. The user fabricated this story. It's heavily agreed upon that this whole thing was a hoax not initiated by WKCR, but by the anonymous 4chan poster themselves. Pros. If you Google this incident, you'll find that very little is documented about the hijack other than the YouTube video and 4chan post relating to it. It should be noted that broadcast signal intrusions are greatly archived due to their phenomenal impact. There's even a Wikipedia page dedicated to recording every instance television and radio were compromised. However, you'll see that the WKCR incident fails to be included anywhere on the page. It's not even documented on WKCR's own Wikipedia page. It seems something like this would have garnered quite a bit of attention. You may defend this by saying it's an obscure station, but that wouldn't matter. It would still garner much coverage in media, as any random hijack would and does. Not even the FCC investigated such a broadcast intrusion. Furthermore, it's up in the air as to when this broadcast was captured. Depending on the source, you'll find that the years range from 1994 to 96. Again, other broadcast intrusions are well documented and have exact years, dates, and times accurately describing when they occurred. This implies that the WKCR incident was faked, due to its exact date being speculated. There's also the argument that the audio clip, despite being recorded by an old tape recorder, sounds fairly modern, especially for an audio clip allegedly from the mid to late 90s, though the defense against this is the fact older audio samples can be cleaned up and refurbished to today's standards, but it's admittedly suspicious. You also have to take into consideration that this post was shared on 4chan's X Paranormal board, so it should be taken with a grain of salt anyway. Cons. Even though this seems like a fake story, it doesn't read like one. When people fabricate stories on the internet, like creepypastas for example, there's almost always a video that accompanies the story which hardly correlates to what's being said. Here, the video of the hijack aligns fairly well with the user's claims. Another thing with stories like creepypastas or fictional stories is that they're usually paragraphs long, whereas this user is brief and their post sounds somewhat natural in what they're saying, rather than it being scripted or overly dramatic. Also, some stories create a certain entity to make a tall tale on the internet seem interactive, like a made-up organization, place, or even a murderer. In this case, the entity in question would be 89.9 WKCR, which if you happen to Google, you'll find is in fact a real station. That's not to say every fictional story on the internet uses non-existent entities, however. Many a creepypasta gain notoriety for incorporating video games, TV shows, and even fast food joints as the sole plot for their tales. Furthermore, an obscure station based at a random college in New York is an odd selection to create a foundation for an urban legend upon. But none of this truly negates this from being a hoax. I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions with the information given here, but real or fake, there's definitely something creepy about this audio clip. It's hard to say whether it's the screeching at the beginning, the ominous voice of the woman, the silence here and there, or simply what's being said. Let's talk about what exactly makes this particular piece of audio creepy. I said earlier that some believe this to be any other number station, and while I don't personally agree with that, I'll admit that there is a message hidden here, one that people to this day are still trying to decipher. I want to go over what exactly is being said in the audio clip here. As stated earlier, in the clip, a woman dramatically reads off what sounds to be obituaries of 9 deceased victims and the dates in which they passed. Some believe these names and dates hold something relating to a bigger picture, which could explain more of the meaning behind this hijack. Bear in mind that these are not opinions of my own, nor facts in general, rather speculative theories of what could be said and what people believe the connections here to be. Additionally, the information gathered here is not my own, and all credit goes to the respective sources who investigated this and shared it in their articles. I'll have an interpretation for each name given, in the order they are in the recording, then try to explain what the connections allegedly refer to.
August 22nd, 1985, Irene McGillis Tulio. Sister Millie, Margaret, Dan, Tony, Ida, Dominic, Nair, Scat, Elvira, and Joe. Wife of William, Mother, Mary, and grandmother, Liz, and Billy, and me.
August 22nd, 1985, Irene McGillis Tulio, sister of Millie, Margaret, Tony, Ida, Dominic, Alvira, and Joe. Wife of William, mother of Marion, Lisa, and Billy. There was an Irene DeTullio McKellos who passed away on August 22nd, 1985. However, if she is who the speaker refers to, they managed to mix up her married and maiden names. McKellos was born in 1907, married a man named William McKellos, had a daughter named Marion, and her siblings were Joseph, Genevieve Ida, Adam, Scotty, Alvara, Teresa, and Margaret DeTullio. Some of these names and facts check out. However, in the recording, the speaker states that McKellos had 3 children named Mary, Lisa, and Billy, from what other sources could make out. And although Marion could check out as Mary, there's nothing even implying McKellos had any additional kids. Marion was an only child.
July 4th, 1987, Peter Gunn, son of Robert Stubble K, brother Bob, Karen, Cindy, and Mary, husband of Lisa, father of Shady, Uncle Rick, and Lucy, my brother-in-law.
July 4th, 1987, Peter, son of Robert K, brother of Bob, Karen, Cindy, and Mary, husband of Lisa, father of Rick and Lucy, my father-in-law. It's as of yet unknown who this person is. Concrete facts state their name was Peter, and they passed on July 4th, 1987. They had a father named Robert, 4 siblings named Bob, Karen, Cindy, and Mary, a wife named Lisa, and 2 children named Rick and Lucy. It's possible their last name could be Dunwell, or something that sounds similar. There's no record of anyone on Find a Grave under this name, however, so it's very likely it's another surname. The audio is too muffled to clearly make anything out. This one keeps you scratching your head, given that the speaker allegedly gives away that they're related to the deceased through marriage. A lot of people agree. It sounds like they say that Peter is their father-in-law. If this is true, it could answer a plethora of questions, the biggest being the speaker's identity, which could clear a lot of smoke here.
November 1988, John Burns, son of John Sr. and Marilyn, brother Kathy and Chris, step-friend of Lisa and Billy.
November 1988, John Burns, son of John Sr. and Marilyn, brother of Kathy and Chris, Lisa and Billy. There is apparently a John Burns that existed whose parents' names were John and Marilyn, and whose sisters' names were Kathleen and Christine. Kathleen could be misheard as Catherine, which could be shortened to Kathy, and Chris is short for Christine. The only problem with this is that this John Burns passed away in October 1988, not November. However, it's very possible this is our guy, seeing that there are too many correlations to dismiss here. Lisa and Billy seem to make a guest appearance yet again, and once again, they aren't in this person's record of family members.
On the 21st, 1988, Barry Valentino, son of Barry Sr. and Jean, brother Scott, Mark, and Lisa Ann's friend and my friend.
December 21st, 1988, Barry Valentino, son of Barry Sr., brother of Scott, Mark, and Lisa, and his friend, my friend. On December 21st, 1988, a flight known as the Pan Am Flight 103 was in the air over the Scottish town of Lockerbie, headed for New York City, when a bomb planted on board the plane took the lives of 243 passengers, 16 of the crew, and 11 residents of Lockerbie, making for a total of 270 fatalities. One of the passengers aboard was 28-year-old Barry Valentino Jr., who is likely the one mentioned here, though it's undetermined what the speaker means when saying, "and his friend, my friend," which is undeniably what they say. It's odd they would leave this random friend anonymous.
February 1985, Frank Oppenheimer, brother of Robert, husband of Jackie and Emily, father of Michael, our friend.
February 1985, Frank Oppenheimer, brother of Robert, husband of Jackie and Millie, father of Michael, our friend. If this guy sounds at all familiar, It's probably because he's the brother and fellow physicist to Robert Oppenheimer, who was also mentioned in the recording. Robert, you may know as the father of the atomic bomb in his role in the Manhattan Project. Frank did in fact go through 2 marriages, the first being with Jacqueline Yvonne Kwan, better known as Jackie, and the second being Mildred Danielson, or Millie for short. Frank did have a son named Michael, who apparently is our speaker's friend, except they say our friend, implying there is more than one speaker.
In 1987, Henrietta Graham, mother of Ian in Sally, my friend.
May 1987, Henrietta Graham, mother of my friend. There doesn't appear to be a Henrietta Graham who passed away in May of 1987. It's likely I'm not looking hard enough, but seeing as I'm not the only internet sleuth who has had trouble finding this one, it's safe to say it's a dead end. Apparently the offspring of this Henrietta was friends with our speaker, but their name is obscured by the mumbling and moaning in the background.
1988, Edward McEvan's mother born in June 1985,
March 17, 1988, Edward McKellos, brother of William, June, Mary, and Peggy, father of Shirley, Allie, and Geraldine, heart attack. This one's rather interesting. There's only one person that I've found who has deciphered this. People weren't sure of the last name until this person managed to decode it. There was an Edward McKellos who passed away on March 17, 1988. His siblings were William, James, Mary, and Margaret. It's hard to tell, but the speaker might have either meant to say James, but said June instead, or everyone is mishearing James as June. The audio here is too distorted to tell sometimes. But on the other hand, Margaret, who wasn't mentioned in the recording, was nicknamed Peggy, whose name you can hear clearly. So the speaker refers to her by her nickname. Edward was married to an Evelyn Snyder, who gave birth to their daughter Albina, who the speaker could be referring to as Allie. He later on married a woman named Ethel Tilton, and together they had a daughter named Shirley, whose name is also mentioned. However, there is no record of Edward having a child named Geraldine. This is also the first mention of a cause of death in the recording. When Edward's obituary is repeated, the speaker whispers heart attack, which implies the obvious. This is one of the only 2 names that hint at this. Additionally, you may have noticed a familiarity with this name and another in the audio, that being William McKellos, Edward's brother. William was the husband of Irene DeTullio McKellos, who was previously mentioned.
April 1988, Ruth Arnani, wife of Robert Henry.
April 1988, Ruth or Rupert. Nothing is known about this one so far. All we have is the date of April 1988 and a possible Ruth or Rupert as the first name. With both being common names in history, without a last name, we'll probably never know where to look. October 1988, Marvin Tunick, father of Barbara, husband of Elsie, Barbara's dad, kidney failure. This one's explanation is really only speculation. In the recording, the name sounds like Morgan Tunick, but others have investigated what they believed was Marvin Tunick, and all they found was this, a Willis Tunick, who passed away on August 12, 1986, a far cry from the date mentioned. However, this Tunick did marry an Elsie and had a daughter named Barbara. Perhaps the speaker misremembered the date and name? Maybe this Willis Tunick went by Morgan or Marvin? It's hard to say. This one also stands out as it's the first one to use the redundancy of saying that Barbara was this person's daughter. It's also the second name to hint at a cause of death, being that of kidney failure. The significance as well as connections to all these names is still unknown, and some are still only speculated to be identified. Frank Oppenheimer and Barry Valentino are the only ones confirmed because of their impact in history. So why bring them up if nothing's been confirmed? Well, as with anything, there are some theories about this. The leading one being that all the names here were victims of a plane crash, excluding Frank Oppenheimer, who is assumed to be mentioned as a means of explaining that all the fatalities stated in the recording were instigated by terrorist bomb attacks due to Frank's brother Robert being the father of the atomic bomb. Back when the old tape on YouTube had a comment section, this is what one viewer had to say in relation to this theory. This is more than likely the work of a signal hacker who had a political agenda. All the names she read were those of victims of 2 airplane incidents that were the subject of conspiracies from the year they happened, 1988, and stretched to the 1990s. It was believed by conspiracy theorists that the U.S. government was behind both the Northwest Airlines crash in 1987 because of the mysterious circumstances to the crash, and the Pan Am Airlines bombing in 1988. Conspiracy theorist signal hacker probably decided to take control of the broadcast and read the names of all the passengers killed and their family members, likely to remind everyone of who they were and not to forget them. As intriguing as this sounds, there are a few holes here. While the years 1987 and 1988 are frequent in the audio, it's not concrete evidence that they're all related to the Northwest Airlines crash and the Pan Am 103 bombing. Remember that the years range from 1985 to 1988. As stated before, Frank Oppenheimer did not pass away in a plane crash. Barry Valentino is the only confirmed name that has. Also take notice that if every name here had their lives taken by a plane crash, why does the speaker imply 2 names having theirs taken by a heart attack and kidney failure? It's a minor detail, but if this theory were true, why use Frank Oppenheimer as a way to explain that the rest of the names passed away in bombings? Wouldn't you just use Robert Oppenheimer's name to explain that? He was the father of the atomic bomb after all, not Frank. The Northwest Airlines crash occurred on August 16th, 1987, a date that is never mentioned in the broadcast, so this conspiracy is overall false. It's further speculated by a few that this whole thing could be an ARG, which after investigating the names and dates myself, wouldn't be far off in my book. But there is one thing negating this. While it does send one down a rabbit hole like any ARG does, I feel if this were a sort of ARG, the dialogue and the audio would be a little more comprehensive. It would be heavily encoded for sure, but not incoherent. One thing about ARGs is that they want what's being said to be heard and understood in order to solve the puzzle. You can't do this if your speech is obscured. Then again, I could be wrong. Before I wrap this up, I'd like to mention one more thing, something that neither confirms or denies this hijack, but it could help us in identifying with it a little more. There is a piece of audio in this recording that has been traced and identified. It's the beginning song that lasts for roughly 8 seconds before the violin interlude plays. I'll play the snippet in the broadcast and then play a snippet from the actual song. Here is a clip from the old tape. And now here's a clip from the song called Dippin' the Biscuits in the Soup by Billy Cobham. As you can see, they're undeniably the same. the only difference being that the recording in the old tape is pitched up and heavily distorted. This indication could either mean that the 4chan user's tape recorder makes the song sound antique, or that they edited this song to sound that way to back up their story. I would also like to point out that Dippin' the Biscuits in the Soup was released in 1994, so it would check out as a song that could have played on an avant-garde college station in 1995. But on the other hand, it could also be a clever choice of music to further validate this story if it is a hoax. So what do you think? Legitimate broadcast interruption? Hoax? Avant-garde art project? ARG? Whatever the case, I'm sure we can all agree that this is one of the creepiest pieces of audio horror you can find on the internet, and its mystery is definitely an intriguing rabbit hole to fall into. If this at all interested you, be sure to write your thoughts in the comments. Maybe we can solve this 4chan mystery together the more we speculate. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.